So this is probably going to be a mess of a video, but we are going to go with it because I have a few bookish things that I wanted to discuss with you. Namely, my April wrap-up, my May TBR, and what I'm currently reading and my thoughts on them. So for the past 2 months, I haven't really been reading much. I have pretty much dedicated my entire life to Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley. But there was one book that I did manage to finish, and that was Small Gods by Cherryh Pratchett. Obviously, with everything that's happening in the world, I wanted something really light, and I know I can turn to Discworld for that. Discworld is always really light, really funny, really humorous, and just so much fun. They're really simple little adventures, but they are such a ride to go on. This one is the 13th book in the Discworld series, and it's not really tied to any sub-series, at least I don't think. So it's kind of a standalone, and you could actually read it without reading any other Discworld before. So if you were interested in trying Discworld and just seeing what Pratchett's writing is like, this might be a good place to start, because I actually really enjoyed this a lot more than some of the previous Discworld books in the series. I am reading the series in chronological order, so that is kind of to be expected when you're going from the older works to the newer works. I'm expecting it to get better, and I have seen that it does get better with the few books that I have read later on in the series, so I'm really hopeful. But it is starting to turn around, at least in the past couple books that I've been reading, and I did really enjoy this. This is following a young priest in training, I guess. He's a novice for one of the great gods, but it turns out that god may have some problems, and he appears to the novice in the form of a small turtle and tries to boss him around. So it's basically an adventure to figure out what's happening to this god and why he's so small and so weak when he has one of the biggest churches in the land. Obviously from that there is a lot of religious aspects to this story. If you are someone who's very religious, it might be a little bit problematic for you. It discusses religion and philosophy with some very strong ties to historic Catholicism with the Spanish Inquisition. Actually, there are inquisitors and exquisitors in here, so again, some Pratchett humor, but also discussing some really important world topics. And I thought it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the characters. I liked following their adventure. The plot was fast moving. And I think where some of Pratchett's past books that I've been reading have been lacking for me is in the character work. I thought the character work in here was actually pretty good, and I really enjoyed their personalities and following them as they're going on this insane adventure. And again, it's just a lot of fun, and I would recommend it if you're interested in the Discworld or in Cherryh Pratchett's writing. So that is the only book that I have finished in the last 2 months, I guess. My March wrap-up was filmed like at the middle of March, and since then it is now mid-May almost, so I haven't really been reading very much. I have actually been reading 2 books though. It's just that they're very, very big and it's taking me a long time to get through them. But I wanted to discuss a few of my feelings on them so far. So the first one is Fortress in the Eye of Time by C.J. Cherryh. I am more than halfway through this book, so I have some thoughts. This is a book that I actually started before, like years and years ago. It says I bought this in September of 2013, so probably around that time I started this book, and I had to DNF it after a couple chapters because it's just so confusing. The writing is really difficult to understand in times. It's a really odd writing style, and it's very almost superfluous. There is a lot of repetition in very weird sentence structures that make it really confusing to read. So when I first picked it up 7 years ago, I had no idea what was happening. I could not tell at all, and I remember that feeling of not being able to understand anything. And when I went back into it and I was rereading parts that I still partially remembered from that time, it made a lot more sense to me now, but it's still so confusing. There are many passages, especially in the beginning of this book, that I had to reread to just figure out what it was trying to say. Because the other thing about this is it just dumps you straight into the world, and literally the first chapter is giving a whole list of names and history throughout centuries that mean absolutely nothing to you, and for most of the book they still mean nothing to you. And it has this really weird way of jumping around in time. So later on, after a couple 200 pages or something, you get more information about all of those names that you heard in the beginning, and you have to kind of piece it together, but it's not the full story. And then another 200 pages later, it goes over that same section, but it gives you a little bit more information. So it's sort of building on itself and giving you more information, but you have to keep track of things, and it changes topics so frequently that it's really hard to keep track of anything. So it is a very confusing read, but after a while you sort of get used to it, and I found myself really enjoying it at like the 250 page mark or something, and I ended up reading 200 pages in one day, which normally it takes me like a very long time to just get through 10 pages because of the writing style. But once I became more established in the world and I started to learn about some of the characters, it became much more interesting to me, and it really started to grip me. There are a lot of mysteries, especially surrounding the main character. Wow, I did not say what this is about at all. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is actually really hard to describe now that I think about it, because there's a lot of it that's a mystery, and I went in completely blind, so I guess all of it was a mystery to me, but I think a lot of it is supposed to be a mystery to you, so all I can really say is there's an old wizard in a tower who brings to life a man. And that's it. You don't really know what his motivations are, you don't know what the shaping is trying to do. It's all up to you to figure out through this very convoluted book. I say it's really confusing and really convoluted, and it is, and it takes a lot of effort to read, but I am really enjoying it. I love classic fantasy, and it's really nice to just get back into something thick and chunky and full of stuff for me to discover and worlds for me to discover. So far, the world doesn't seem as big as some of the things that we're used to nowadays, like with Wheel of Time and Game of Thrones and everything. It seems much more contained, at least in this first book so far. It's focusing a lot on just one kingdom, and specifically like one borderland of the kingdom, but there is definitely room for it to expand. I have no idea where it goes. I think this is a 5-book series if I'm not mistaken, but I don't really know. I need to do some more research on that. I will probably want to continue in the series depending how this book turns out. Again, I haven't really finished it, so I can't give any final thoughts, but so far I am really enjoying it, even though it does take a while to get into. The other book that I have been slowly working my way through is Dune by Frank Herbert. I am this far into it, and I am reading this actually with my boyfriend. We're reading this simultaneously, which has been so much fun because my boyfriend is not a reader, and this is the first book he's picked up, and we get to read it together because we have 2 copies of it, and it's just been great. But it also means I am not reading it very quickly because I am reading it literally at the same time as him. This is a classic sci-fi. It's about a boy who's basically a prodigy and how he survives all of the political maneuverings in this futuristic empire when he's sent to a really dangerous and uninviting planet. So far we've finished book 1 in this. I don't know how many books there actually are. I would assume 4 or 5. So we are, it looks like a third of the way through. I don't know. But there are definitely things about this that I like and things that I don't. Namely, I really like the world. The world is really interesting, and you have these groups of people who know how to live in this desert land that's infested with giant worms, and then the people who are from the Empire and living behind walls and trying to not get eaten, but also harvest all of the rich spice that's out in the desert that is very, very expensive and very, very sought after throughout the Empire. So the whole mystery around like the people who live in the desert and how they live in the desert and avoid all of these really vicious worms is really interesting to me. That's the part that I really care about. But the characters are annoying. I really don't like the main character, Paul. Also, side note, like everyone has a weird name except Paul and Jessica, and it just makes me laugh. Because you have like Leto and Thorfir and Duncan, I guess, but then you have Paul and Jessica. Anyway, not the point. I don't really like Paul because Paul is kind of a pretentious prick and he's annoying. Jessica is okay, I like her better, but I really like Duke Leto. And if you know the book, there's a problem there. But other than just the characters, the plot is very, very slow moving. It took forever for anything to happen, and even then it's just been very, very minimal action. I also don't really like the writing. There are some really odd phrases in here that just sound weird. Let me see if I can find an example of what I'm talking about, because it's like he tries to make metaphors that just make no sense. And certain sentences in the dialogue just really sound really silly. There's one sentence that my boyfriend and I repeat to each other all the time because it's just so awkwardly worded, and it came up like 50 times in a chapter. I'm not even kidding. It was so often. And it was, they tried to take the life of my son. Who goes through that much effort to say that sentence? Just say, they tried to kill my son? Or, I don't know, not they have tried to take the life of my son. It's just silly things like that that are just pulling me out of the story because it just seems like it's written really weirdly. It is an older book, so I'm not too... I guess I am still critical of it, but it has some sort of a pass there. But it's not really a writing style for me. I'm trying to find one of the silly metaphors. I can't find what I'm looking for. I should have made note of it, but I wasn't thinking. So it just has some really weird metaphors that make no sense, like something about the moon calming his cheek or something. I don't know. But yeah, so the writing is not my favorite. The characters are not my favorite. And some of the plot also, there are parts that are really interesting. There's a lot of political maneuvering. There was one scene at like a dinner party that was really interesting, really tense, because you could feel everyone trying to like outmaneuver each other and not say the wrong thing, and that was really fun. But everything else, there was a scene about literally just battle strategy that I was so bored through. Didn't care at all, and half the words didn't even make any sense because they're made up things that I know nothing about. So it comes in waves. So I wouldn't really say I'm too thrilled about this book. I will continue to read it. I still do want to know what's happening with all of the people who live in the desert, and I think that's what the next part of the book is going to go more into, so I'm excited about that. But I have a feeling that this character is just going to get on my nerves throughout the whole book because I have discovered that I have a thing against really cocky characters. And Paul, yeah, he's definitely cocky. I didn't put this up. I guess I didn't finish it, so it doesn't really count, but I'll put it up anyway. So those are the books that I have either finished or am currently in the middle of. So moving into my May TBR then, I obviously haven't been reading a lot, and so I'm not planning to put a ton of things on my May TBR. Obviously, I want to try and finish Fortress in the Eye of Time and Dune. Those are my main priorities. But I also wanted to try and participate a bit in the Asian readathon because I really enjoyed it last year, and I want to make a point of participating in it because I am partially Asian, and I feel like I have to. But at the same time, I do really want to. I'm really interested in reading more from Asian authors and reading more Asian stories because it's just fascinating to me, and it's not something I normally get to see. So I do plan to participate in this readathon by reading one book that covers all of the prompts because I am not reading very quickly right now. So I think there are 5 prompts, and I can't really remember them off the top of my head, so I'll just put them on the screen. I just know that the book I've picked counts for all of them, and that's The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the second book in the Poppy War series, and I absolutely loved the Poppy War when I read it last year. I was going crazy about it, and I wanted to read the second book so fast, and I didn't get to. The first book was one of my favorite books of 2019, so if you want more information about what it's about and my thoughts on it, then I will link those videos. But I have been meaning to get to this second book for a long time, and this provided the perfect excuse to get to it. Also, my library haul just came in for the audiobook, so it was perfect timing. It is a little bit heavier and darker than what I have been reading so far, and that may prove to be an issue with just everything that's happening in the world. But I'm going to try and read it, and we'll see how it goes. I feel like I'm just going to be sucked in completely, and hopefully it'll just take me out of everything, and I'll be able to handle it. On one hand, I am really excited to get to this book and see where the story goes, but on the other hand, I am scared of it because of just how off the rails the last part of the first book went. So it is kind of holding me back a bit, and this readathon really is just like the perfect excuse to get me to actually read it. It is also on my list of 20 books I want to read in 2020, so I'm hoping to make some progress in my goals, even though I have not really been reading recently. And also more in that vein, I'm probably going to try and read A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is another continuation of a series. It's the Wayfarer series by Becky Chambers. I also read what's it called? The A Small Way to a Long Angry... A Small Way to a Long Angry... No, that's not it. I also read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet last year, and my goal in 2020 is to continue in the series that I've started. So I put a hold on this from my library, and it's coming in pretty soon, so I feel like that is another book that I will be reading maybe in May. And the last book that I may be reading in May is Lords and Ladies by Cherryh Pratchett. This is the next book in the Discworld series that I have to read, and I do not currently own it, but I placed a hold for the ebook at my library, and it should be coming in soon, which is probably why I will be reading it soon. The Discworld books are just really easy and fun to get through. They're really light, and they give me a little bit of a break and just a small adventure that I know exactly what I'm getting when I get into a Discworld book, so I wanted to have one of those on hand. Also, because I have an entire stack of books on my shelf that are all Discworld, and they're all turned around because I flipped around every book that I haven't read on my shelves, and it's kind of bothering me that there's a big old stack that you can't see. It's literally right behind me, so you can't see it, but there's this big stack of books that nothing is turned around because I haven't read any of them, and I can't read them until I've read Lords and Ladies. So I'm going to be reading that so that hopefully I will be able to get to some of those physical books and turn them around. So those are the 5 books that I will be reading in May, hopefully. If they're not the books that I'm already reading, there are books for both the Asian readathon and for my 20 in 2020, because I think all of those books, all of those other 3 books, count for the books that I put on my 20 in 2020 list. So that is a good sign. I'm hoping to make some progress in my reading goals, even though I have not really been reading recently. So we'll see how that goes. I don't know how it will go because I am still completely sucked into Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley. So we will find out together. I hope you've been doing well. I hope you've been staying safe and healthy and as happy as you could possibly be, and I will see you later. Bye.